So with that, I'll call to order the regular meeting for Tuesday, March 8th, meeting number 1557. Pursuant to section 10 of Council Procedure Bylaw number 788/2015, this meeting will be held electronically and all members of council and staff will be attending via electronic means. In honor of the Liwa Tool, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwa Nation. Can I please get a motion to go in camera? Moved by Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll get started and he can catch up. You guys good to go? Okay. So I will call back to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, March 8th. And pursuant to section 10A of Council Procedure Bylaw 788/2015, this meeting will be held electronically and all members of council and staff will be attending via electronic means. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. I'd very much like to, in honor of the Liwa Tool, the village, I'd like to acknowledge that the Village of Pemberton that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwa Nation. Any changes to the agenda? Can I get a motion to approve as presented? Councillor Craddock, Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from Committee of the Whole 224 from Tuesday, February 22nd, moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Antonelli. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And adoption of minutes from Committee of the Whole 225 from Tuesday, March 1st, moved by Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll go right into the main event, which is our budget session number 3. We'll get Mr. Sikora to join us again. All right, good afternoon, Mr. Sikora. We are ready to have a look at our third budget session whenever you're settled in.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for having me today. To simplify following along today, I just wanted to make sure that I'm referencing our report, which begins on page 8 of 14 in the agenda package today. I've laid it out similarly to past and wanted to just reference that throughout the meeting today. So as background and as a reminder to our past sessions here, our prior budgeting sessions have presented both a 0% tax increase scenario and some of the projects previously, which we'll be discussing further in the 5-year plan at our next session. The intent of today is to review the potential tax increase scenarios, which we had discussed at our last session. So I've brought forward a presentation of the implications of the 4%, 5%, 6%, and 7% tax increases. For a little background, I wanted to share that Pemberton has continued to maintain a very low residential tax rate, and currently it's the 6th lowest of the 161 municipalities in British Columbia. We have received the 2022 BC assessment rule, which I've provided in the appendix here, and I'll discuss a little further, and wanted to review the kind of implications of the rates of increase which we've seen in Pemberton this year. I did want to highlight that, as we look at our current financial position, we are seeing the continued pressures from a declining contributed surplus, and there is a real need to continue to contribute to the reserves to ensure long-term viability and continued operations at a sustainable level. So with low increases over the last 2 years, I wanted to highlight that it's our view that there is continued pressure and a need to do that. So on page 8 of 14, I've highlighted the non-market change report and wanted to, before going into the details, just note a couple of housekeeping items. There will be a couple amendments to the report just with the average change. It's higher than stated on page 9. And the other housekeeping item before we begin is just that on page 10, there is a 2020 taxes that should be reflected at current year. So I just wanted to make sure there was no confusion there. But the assessment change that we've experienced this year through the BC assessment, which was received, indicates this year an average increase, excuse me, an average increase of 25.72% across residential classes, 1.07% across utilities, 2.18% across light industry, business and others 20.1%, rec and non-farm 8.3%, farm 13.2%, and the implication of that and the potential tax scenarios I'll discuss. So on page 9 of 14, what I've done here, if you'd like to follow along, I've laid out 4, 5, 6, and 7% scenarios and wanted to really highlight what that looks like to a number of various categories and highlight the average. So in Pemberton this last year, the average assessment value was $1.085 million. And that's for the average single family home. The average residential was $763,000. So if you look at the table, you would see that, for example, if there was a house on Poplar, the first column, the implication to a $1.056 million home at a 4% increase would be a $54.90 increase to their taxes. Follow that all the way to the 7%, we would see a $96.21 increase to that same Poplar home if the direction was to show a 7% increase based on this assessment. I've highlighted below as well the budgetary increases and what that translates to in terms of the dollars that we're looking for, ranging from a 4% budget increase, where that scenario would result in a $78,398 increase, all the way up to a 7% budget increase of $137,196. So again, with that range, I did want to provide a little additional context. Again, I did indicate earlier that the Village of Pemberton is 6th lowest of the 161 municipalities in BC in terms of residential tax rate. Village of Pemberton has seen an increase of 24.28% over 2021 in market value, with the remaining increase due to non-market change. So non-market change increases can come through things such as the addition of inventory or folios into the roll. Additionally, the other categories as referenced in Appendix A, which is on page 12 of 14, aside from residential ALR, have all shown an increase as well. So there's been significant change in market value of properties in Pemberton this year. So the requests or the information here, I hope provides a little more color as to what the impact is to average taxpayers to fund these, to potentially fund these increases from 4 to 7%. And these would be supporting essentially the rising costs that we're seeing, higher rates of inflation, and want to avoid the need to significantly increase future taxes in subsequent budgets. So to provide a little more color as well, I did want to highlight on page 10 of 14, the tax increases that we've noted that some of our neighbors in the Sea to Sky have shown, and I normalized that against an illustrative example of the $1.085 million average single family resident. So we do see that that Whistler is very near to the rate here. It is again one of the lowest, one of the top 5 lowest tax rates in the assessments in BC. But initially, I've understood that they're looking through preliminary stages at a 6.72% increase. Squamish, again, a little bit higher, and however showing a proposed increase of 4.1%. So their rate would be 2.8%. I would also like to highlight reserves today for your information. I've presented those in Appendix B and referenced our contributions, our contributions for the year in the on page 10 as well. Proposal is to increase capital reserves by $347,258, water reserves by $324,000, and sewer increase to $200,000, up from $160,000. The reserves balances I've highlighted on page 14, where I'd highlight principally the general reserves of $102,300, capital reserves of $647,934, water reserves of $1.205 million, and sewer reserves of $247,998. And council, as you may recall from our prior projects discussions and what we will bring forward in the next session, which includes the 5-year plan and our asset management review, it would be my recommendation that we're very considerate of these balances and the high demand on future funding for the various projects and maintenance of infrastructure as it is aging, and we have seen a lower contributed surplus in past years. Now, I guess in terms of feedback today and direction, which we've come here to seek before we prepare the 5-year plan and subsequent bylaw adoptions, so on and so forth, I thought it would be appropriate to seek direction, seek questions to make sure this is understood, and really get the direction towards where we should be moving with these potential tax increases.
Thanks, Thomas. Just a really quick note of context there on the page that you referenced, where we're comparing against Worcester, Squamish, and Lillooet. You see, obviously, that Squamish and Lillooet's rates are almost twice, and then more than twice ours. Worcester is very low amongst the top 5 or bottom 5 as well, but I'd just like to point out that Worcester has an incredibly high amount of businesses per capita. So there's a lot more commercial rate or commercial taxation that goes into their revenues per capita than you would see here. And that's, our tax base is, our business taxpayers pay a lot of taxes for sure. A lot of it is on the back of our residents, whereas it's much higher in Worcester for commercial rates. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's an important difference in terms of how our rates land compared to Worcester. Let's open it up for questions on the report before we go into our thoughts on tax increases. Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, thanks very much, through to Mr. Sikora. We were to receive, I think, about $340,000 from the regional district for the sale of some property to them out there. I'm not sure if I'm seeing that in the reserves, or maybe you could help me where that is, please.
I'd have to get back to you, Councillor Craddock, in terms of the presentation of that figure. I don't have it offhand.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing no questions, we've gone through the first few phases of this budget. We've seen our operating budget come forward. We've seen some of the pressures that we've discussed about in the future. Who would like to start the conversation as to where we land with tax increases for this year? You want to start it out? All right, I'll start it out. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. We saw a 3.9% increase in the consumer price index. So from my perspective, we would have to start at the 4%. I'm still hard pressed to go much above that, although I can understand Mr. Sikora's reasoning behind starting to bring in a little bit more money for the community as our infrastructure ages and we need more money to cover more staffing as we add to it as the community grows. So I'm open to consider it, but my feeling is we need to start at the 4%.
Thank you. I didn't see any hands, so I'll throw my 2 cents in. As Councillor Craddock said, we're already looking at a 3.9% CPI increase. That's a hit right off the bat. Nobody likes to raise taxes. It's not a popular thing, especially under circumstances now where we're seeing gas prices over $2. Everything is costing more. So I know we're all cognizant of the burdens, the financial burdens that are on our residents, and we want to definitely keep that in mind. I would, however, point to the fact that we are seeing our operating expenses grow, and if we don't start to incorporate some reasonable tax increases now, our residents are going to be wholly unprepared for a big hit in the next few years as we continue to grow. So I think it's responsible for us and prudent to do it gradually. We raised it by like 1, I think 2 years ago, 0 last year because of the pandemic uncertainty. That's left us a little bit behind. We want to build reserves, which we have seen the usefulness as we had to go into our water reserve to look at certain projects moving forward to balance with borrowing. So I think our reserves that we have built have served us well, and we want to continue building them for the future. Fact is, 6th lowest rate in the province, I think, is fairly significant information. So with all that said, I would like to see us consider a 6% increase. I know it sounds like a higher number, but again, we did 0 last year and 1 the year before, and we've allowed ourselves to fall behind, so to speak. And I think it's important that we keep we talk about all the pressures that are coming from everything from, the growth of our community, which is going to lead to extra policing costs, which is going to actually lead to extra infrastructure costs, all those things. And we want to build our reserves in the face of that. So I think it's prudent and responsible for us to look at raising our taxes, I'd say by 6%, perhaps a bigger hit than we'd like, but I think it's important to do it steadily over the next few years. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I'll leave it at that for now. Councillor Noble, and then Councillor Antonelli.
I think Antonelli was before me.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, I just had a comment on that table on page 10 that we were talking about showing the rate and how that affects a house that's worth $1.1 million and comparing it to the other communities. But I think maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but what's missing from that information is that in Lillooet, the houses are not worth, they're not valued at 1.1, they're valued at about 1/3 of it. or maybe half or a third. So comparing apples and oranges there. So I really don't think that Pemberton has low taxes. When I talk to people in the community, we pay a lot of tax for the amount of amenities we have. And I know what's coming and that we still need to consider increases, but affordability is a huge issue right now. So I think I'm more in favor of what Councillor Craddock said, looking at 3.9 or a little bit above there. And then also in previous years when we've agreed on the rate, after all the numbers come in, it often jumps up another point. So I think I would be looking more at a 4 or 5% increase, and then assuming that it would jump up almost another percent when all the numbers come in.
Sorry, Councillor Antonelli, what do you mean by the jumping up another point? I don't follow.
Just in previous years, I'm not sure exactly what it is that affects it. It's when we get the final roll. Is that what it is that affects it? Yeah, and so that's what causes that change after we've approved the increase. There's always like some slight difference.
There's some adjustments to the completed roll for sure, but last year we said 0 and we stayed at 0. The year before, I believe it was 1 and we stayed at 1, so it didn't jump up, it didn't change after we made that decision.
Okay, maybe it was the year before that then.
I mean, whatever we decide on, there doesn't have, especially considering that what we're talking about now, if we were to, whatever increase we have, since we've looked at a 0% increase in operating right now, is going towards reserve. So if there is some change in the completed roll, that could be just absorbed by what we put into reserves at the end of the day, and whatever rate we choose today and then go with moving forward will remain the rate. It's not going to jump up. It'll remain the same. So I think we pick the number that we're comfortable with for all the reasons that we're all stating, and go with that. Thank you for that. Who's next? Councillor Noble, go ahead.
I would support a 5% increase because we do have growing pains as well as a lot of aging infrastructure, and we've seen a lot happening around that. And with the CPI going up and everything going up, we're going to be in dire straits in a few years if we don't make up for falling so far behind. So yeah, I would support a 5% increase at this time.
Okay, Councillor Zant.
Thanks, Mayor Richmond. Yeah, I could appreciate the comments from Councillor Antonelli, Councillor Noble, and Councillor Craddock. I'm sitting here, my own personal thoughts are, if we're going to see a lot of increases in everything, whether it's goods, services, gas prices, and I feel that a 5% increase is fair, just to keep us on par, so that the village still has some funds left over and can allocate some cash to reserves, and then keep up with the everything else that's going to start increasing as well. That's basically why I'm going with a 5% increase. I feel 6. I understand your comments, and I see where you're coming from on 6%, and I feel we've been fair in the last couple of years. I also hear your comments that more reserves would have been better, but I feel 6 is a bit too much. I feel that 5 is more fair. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to be clear on my comments, do I like 6? No. It's more of what I see coming and what I've seen happen, and I know we're all trying to protect our residents, and that's one of the things we set out to do. So I totally respect that. I just know that we went 0 last year and 1 the year before, and that put us substantially behind when we weren't already, Councillor Craddock can attest, when we council years ago, we started talking about the need to build reserves, and I don't think we've met the targets that were discussed back then in terms of building reserves. So they've come in handy. We need to build those reserves. We know operating is going to increase. And again, we only did a 0 and a 1 the year before. So I don't like 6 either. I don't like 7. I don't even like 5. I'm just trying to be prudent looking to the future. So that's why I'm suggesting 6, not because I love it, but I'm willing to carry on listening to the rest of council and seeing where the rest of council wants to go. But that's where my comments come from. Go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, just through to you, Mayor Richmond. I wonder if Councillor Antonelli was wondering if the SLRD had given us an idea if there's a big rate increase there. I think you and Councillor Zand brought back, they're trying to hold it at 0 this year.
Well, the PVID's budgets that Councillor Zant and I discussed are fairly, there's fairly little increase if at all. I think, in fact, some went down a little bit because of non-market change. So the non-market changes, it has sort of looked like it'll absorb most of the PVIS increases. So we're not going to see much coming out of that. The transfer station, due to the construction or the development of the new transfer station, that service area is definitely seeing some increases, because there's new loans coming on to subsidize the construction. Other than that, it's fairly steady. And from the regional board, like the bigger budgets there, I was going to report on it, but just to answer your question, Councillor Craddock, in our last budget meeting, there was some substantial increases in the operating budget. Due to non-market across the region, there was next to no impact to taxation or to taxpayers, like literally next to none. But even with that, myself and a couple of the other directors found that the increase to operating budget was still quite high. So we sent staff back to spread some of the staff increases over a couple of years instead of all this year, as well as a couple other projects, recognizing that a new CAO is coming in and certain projects will take a little while. So that will be coming back at the next meeting with a little bit of reduction. But in terms of tax impact, there's next to nothing that we're looking at from that perspective, Councillor Craddock.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Questions? And again, let's all just call it what it is. No, it's always a difficult conversation where we're talking about how we spend other people's money. We're sitting here recognizing that gas prices are ridiculously high. We're seeing increases across the board. So let's call it what it is. Nobody's comfortable in this situation unless we can peel back dollars and give them back to our taxpayers. Nobody's actually feeling really good as we make this decision. And they're tough decisions to make. It's about balancing affordability now. It's with the future resiliency of our community. So tough decisions. I'm hearing 4, 5, and 6. I'm open to more comments. If there's no more comments, then I'll start looking for motion. Mr. Sikora, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if I might just provide a little more color and just lay out the average residential assessment implications of those, just so that those numbers are fresh. So with the average residential assessment of $762,633, the implications of a 4% increase would be $39.70. Implications of a 5% would be $49.63. 6% would be $59.56, and 7% would be $69.48. And of course, BC assessment does determine the market value of properties independently. So that's looking at an average, and just wanted to be cognizant that that's looking at this on aggregate of all residential assessment in Pemberton.
So with that said, I'm just looking at your other chart here. $1 million, $1,050,000 home on, we'll say Poplar, we'd look at, and we'll just round numbers, is about $100 over the course of the year for a 7% increase.
That's correct.
That's like 30 cents a day. Any further comments, or is somebody prepared to make a motion? Neither. Councillor Craddock.
I'd hope not to stretch beyond 4%, but looking at a 5%, and I'm looking at my particular property here, if we go 5%, I'm looking at just over $5 a month increase. I think I can handle that, even though senior on very low income, but I think we have to take the opportunity to move forward in our community, make sure we have reserves available for things like the new fire truck that's coming up, a new dump truck for public works. There's a lot of things we have to do in water and sewer still to make sure we're ready and prepared for that in the future. And as much as I find it difficult, I think it's only realistic that we move forward and take a look at 5%. So I would make a motion that we approve the budget with an increase of 5%.
I'll second.
Okay.
So
And
just
so
to
this
clarify,
This would be a recommendation from the committee to council.
Yes,
For staff to bring back a budget showing, and a 5-year plan showing a 5% increase. That's what the motion would be.
correct.
Moved by Councillor Caddick. Sorry, who seconded that?
I did.
Councillor Noble, further discussion? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Congratulations, Mr. Sikora, your first budget.
We do meet later on, but thank you very much, Councillor.
Yeah, but you could take the next 12 minutes off.
I will just provide a little color to one of the earlier questions, if I may. The sale of the lands requested will be allocated in general reserves, but that hasn't gone through yet. So that'll be reflected later, not in what you saw today.
And that's in the
Thank you.
land reserve column, right?
It would be general reserves at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sikora. If there's nothing else, final comments from council or from the committee? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to adjourn committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Caddick, second by Councillor Antonelli. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned and we are back at 5:30 for the budget presentation. Are we done recording?